easily recognizable by the beard. I'm not Janina. My name is Tobias. I'm from the Lucerne School of Applied Sciences and Arts, or Lucerne University of Applied Sciences. I'm a research assistant and co-author of the paper I'm presenting. Janina, unfortunately, had to apologize herself due to sickness. We will talk, or I want to talk about Sarnetz. Why Sarnetz? Sarnetz, or Sarnetz, which it's called today, is a small village in the southeastern part of Switzerland, in the mountain, more precisely in the Engadin, in the canton of Grisons. The target of the village is to become CO2 neutral in 2020, so already in the past. And that's why in 2011 they started a project called Energia 2020. And that was a collaboration with the ETH in Zurich, and the result of this project was a board game to have sessions with multiplayers to create possible solutions to achieve this CO2 neutralness by playing together in different roles. The whole thing was set up with a lot of pieces. You had to, for example, solar panels which you could place freestanding or on the rooftop of existing building. And you had the original map of Sarnetz. And as you can see here on this picture, if you want to have heat distribution systems, you had to lay down the pieces by hand and talk about possible solutions to how to solve the issue of CO2 neutrality. And what we did now is based on the original map. So the board game was a section of the original map of Sarnetz, and we digitalized this based on the GIS data from Switzerland with the exact tile size of each ground, and I lost the track now, and just reproduced, digitalized the whole board game so that it's possible to play in multiplayer network version. So about the game itself, that was the initial data, the GIS sections of each property, and we digitalized every building in a simplified way with some more precise model to recognize the center, for example, the school. And what we want to target is what specific measure we could do to achieve the CO2 neutrality. Either way is reduce the energy consumption of existing buildings. Another approach is produce more energy by adding energy producing buildings or measures like solar panels on the roof, or a small thermal heating system or energy producing system next to the building. And the idea is to figure out which strategy is the most efficient, and who are the different stakeholders, what interests are behind these stakeholders, and how to find a solution agreeable for everyone. For example, if you imagine I could place a lot of solar panels just on the open fields, but since Sarnetz is the entry point of a national park and tourism is certainly an important aspect, probably the local citizens and people living from tourism wouldn't agree with this approach just to fill everything with solar panels. So we have to find a consensus which is affordable but still achieves the whole goal. This is how the digitalized version looks like. We have on the right side, we have measures, what we could do. For example, renovate a building with oil heating, renovate a building with district heating, or replace oil heatings and connect this building to the district heating system, add additional power plants to the district heating, and so on. And on the left side, we see that what's planned at the moment is empty and was what already implemented on the downside. And the implementation is always made by the whole team. So 5 players play together in different roles. And the moderator on top triggers a vote in the right moment. And if everybody agrees, these planned measures will be executed. And on the top bar, you see that the CO2 is already on -2, so they definitely reached the goal. You start at 88 and you go to 0, ideally. And the local energy is produced 78 out of 75, so it reached as well. And in this example, the team spent 135 coins, money, whatever unit it is, to reach that goal. And that's exactly a winning situation. So if you're able to reduce the whole CO2 amount the village is currently emitting, and you produce enough energy to fulfill the need of the village, then you win the game. But since 2 groups compete against each other, or multiple groups compete against each other, the one team with the fewest amount of money wins the round. And one advantage or difference to the board game, I mean, the game mechanic itself or the game rules are the same, but usually on the board game, people had to check out of the map themselves what is allowed to do, where can I place a solar panel, which building I can't touch because it's under historical protection services to keep the characteristic of the village of Sarnetz. And where could I renovate buildings, and where could I connect district heatings. And that's why we applied filters, so if you choose a certain measure, you can only see the buildings which are available for this operation. To the roles, next to the moderator, which leads the round and guides the team a little bit, every player gets a role and has to represent this interest group or stakeholder within this round. So if I am the finance minister, I would say, no, everything is too expensive. We have to find cheaper solutions. If I'm the environmental or the CO2 emission manager, I would say, I don't care for the cost, it just has to go down. We need to reduce the amount, and of course the citizen representative says, no, the power plant next to the school, that's a bad idea. We don't want the solar panels, that looks ugly, and so on. And so since every player takes the role and focuses on the role, the discussion occurs, and together they have to find a suitable solution. Another game view, just jump over. Now 1 or 2, 3 small enhancements compared to the board game or changes. One big advantage is no longer location-based, since in the board game every player has to stand around the table, but we changed it to an external video solution. Could use Zoom, for example, or other call systems. And therefore the locational dependency is solved. The moderator has a stronger role since he or she triggers the vote. Therefore, there are more possibilities to just link in and say, okay, now we decide. We trigger a vote, either it's declined or accepted, but it's not like on the board game where you have to really assemble everyone, so please quiet and now we decide. But we do it in the game mechanics. And we can always see where other players are currently on the board because they're represented by these tiny figurines. We call it Mannsköckeli in Switzerland, or in Swiss German part of Switzerland. And some automation of processes like the one I showed at the beginning, that you have to place these connection lines yourself. The digital version searches the shortest possible path without violating any rules. You can't build pipes here, and connects the building automatically. How did we test the game, if it works? Originally, the whole game was planned to show at the Olympic Games in the House of Switzerland in 2020, but since Corona happened, the games were delayed by 1 year, and in the second year we thought we can still show it in the House of Switzerland, but then the House of Switzerland was cancelled, and we decided to show the game in several universities and do the workshops there. And as you see in the next slide, because all those points are already mentioned, we have here a local version that all the players sat together and played. And here, as an alternative, the digital version with online competitors. And the whole game was presented or was played on a WebGL browser version. And we did it on the University of Sofia, Tsukuba, Osaka, Tohoku, Kansai, and Hiroshima. Now, some results for the last seconds. The players were able to learn or increase the learnings and awareness of the topic itself, as well as the interest of the different stakeholders they represented in the rounds. They were able to argue within the role they played. And the citizens representative was the most liked or valuable role for many to just, to generate this acceptance that they really have the link to the village or town they live. And therefore, yes, that's pretty much it. And for future things, we would want to increase the gameplay, the usability, and of course do more workshops and adapt the whole game to other cities, towns, or regions. Thank you, and I hope there's room for 1 or 2 questions.
So thank you very much. I'm really impressed by this game. And I was wondering how much time you need to embed it into the workshops, because I was not thinking, okay, I have the front end, I have this, the situation itself to decide, I have the measures, and then you mentioned you compete also between other groups. Mm-hmm. I take my own role, so I perceive it that as a player I have a lot of things to be aware of, and I wonder how did you embed it in order to ensure that the players understand what they need to do, and how long did it take you, and what was your experience to embed it into a learning scenario?
Mm-hmm. Thank you for the question. Usually I wasn't really part of the workshop, so I have to relate to or rely on the knowledge I got from Janina. Usually there was a 45-minute introduction session where they showed a short video about the situation and Sarnetz itself and about what's the goal, and a short introduction into the game, but then the usually moderators were experienced player. They led through the whole game during the play.
Thank you. I have one question with different drawers. First, how long do you think it would take to make it more dynamic? So, for example, we could link it to Swiss topo data to target an area like, let's say, another village, and it would generate the board in an automated way, as we all have the data with Swiss topo, it's available. Wouldn't it be a good idea to make like more of a citizen game? Because actually it's a problem to every communities in Switzerland right now. How do you think it would be implemented, or if it can be? And how long have you taken, what was the cost to work on a small village like Sarnetz?
Okay. Yeah, the use of, in our case, we use the GIS data, not the Swiss topo with all the 3D dislocation as well, but only really the size of the areas.
Yeah, it's also available.
And we created the buildings in simple models, so that buildings would be reusable for every village. Probably in towns we should adapt the models a little bit, but the idea in the buildings was to have this really distinguishable. That one is environmental or the historical protected. That one is new. That one is old, has oil heating, and so on. So it's not representing. They are not representing the real buildings. But of course, to recognize Sarnetz, we had the school building, and that modeling was just manually done, probably with some automatic data. Swiss topo cities has sometimes 3D models of themselves. We could increase that a little bit. I'm not sure about the project cost at overall. So when we started, just for the digitalization, but it was a not so long project. We had around, not to say it wrong, without the workshops it was 200 work hours. With the workshops, of course, more.
Thank you very much. That's going to have to be the last question. I'm sorry, because we're a bit over time. Thank you very much.